On this edition of In the Know, we are tracking our two top stories to end off the weekend and start off the work week. Two major coastal storms, one being across Atlantic Canada. Blizzard-like conditions on the way. This was earlier this week out in Nova Scotia. Certainly treacherous driving conditions out there. It was also the winds that were ramping up. Those are going to go from 0 to 100 real quick with strong winds in the forecast. We'll tell you how strong those are going to get as we watch this storm make its way on through, starting off through parts of the Maritimes on your Sunday and then creating quite the wintry Monday ahead. We'll get into those details, but the next top story is out in British Columbia, where we've already seen impacts south of the border. This is in Washington. Catastrophic flooding experienced to end off the week. Rescues were underway. Well, this is the scene out in Abbotsford, Fraser Valley, also within flood warnings, as we've seen already flood impacts, but even more impacts on the way. Here to dive into your full forecast is meteorologist Nadine Powell. Nadine, we're seeing some of those extreme flooding scenes out in Washington, and I think that people out in BC need to start getting prepared for flooding in their region as well. But what's the timing on this, and what are some of the risks associated with this atmospheric river?
Yes, Victoria, we've been in a series of atmospheric rivers, and now we're getting into, I probably say just within the last week or so, this is round 2. We've got another one coming, and we did have some flooding earlier, like we saw there in that video there in the Abbotsford area. But looking forward, we are looking at, with this next intense burst coming through tonight, through tomorrow morning especially, another increased risk of flooding for us, washouts and landslides, and it's going to come with some very strong winds, so power outages, maybe even some down trees, ferry disruptions, and some road closures once again. You know, Victoria, we still do have a couple of important thoroughfares, Highway 1, sections of Highway 1 and Highway 3 that are still closed. So this is going to be a continuation or ramping up once again for us for BC.
Now, speaking of strong winds, when we head out to Atlantic Canada, those winds are literally going to go from 0 to 100. Nadine, what's the timing on the storm impacts there?
Yeah, so we're going to get the precipitation coming in first, and then we're going to see some of the strongest winds. This is going to be a rapidly intensifying low-pressure system where the central pressure drops 24 millibars in 24 hours. And some of the factors that go into such a rapid intensification when we get that cold polar air coming off of Canada, we've got the warm waters from the Atlantic capturing off of the Gulf Stream there. So when we see that low-pressure system actually developing for us for today, you can see south of Atlantic Canada, those lines, that's what we call the isobars, the lines of equal pressure. And the tighter that gradient, the tighter those lines, generally we are looking at, you know, some very strong winds for us, Victoria.
Yeah, you can see that snow starting to push in, creating quite the wintry start to your work week, especially across Newfoundland. We could expect upwards of 30 centimeters of snow, but those winds, those are going to start ramping up specifically Monday afternoon. Check out the Avalon, over 100 kilometers an hour in some place. Nadine, you were calling these hurricane force winds even.
Yeah, certainly so. These gusts, because a Category 1 hurricane, that starts off at 120 kilometers per hour. So we're certainly seeing that in the forecast there for the eastern and northern shores of Newfoundland for us. So this is going to be quite the blustery system. You know, this video here, I think this is our Mark Robinson, who was out in a previous storm some years ago, just showing us some of the impacts that we can experience with this. So no doubt we will be looking at those gusts for some heavy precipitation, storm surge, and coastal erosion possible, and no doubt blizzard-like conditions when we get into that heavy snowfall.